Greetings, this is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, with yet another Asimov short story installment. This one is found in the November 1950 issue of Galaxy. Let's see that, I don't know if you can. It's not very good shape, unfortunately. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. But anyway, November 1950. This time, Horace Gold did not have to buy this if he didn't want to, so that meant that it was a real sale. So now at last he could rest feeling like, okay, he has more markets than astounding science fiction. So, anyway, and on page 34, there's The Misbegotten Missionary by Asimov. That's all there is on this page, so let's see what there's on page 34. Alright, there's a little squib. Obviously, the squib does not get into the book. And it reads, it was a lovable little creature, anxious to help solve the troubles of the world. Moreover, it had the answer. Well, what man ever takes free advice? Illustrated by John King. And the illustration is kind of interesting. I like this. Look at the guy's feet, and you look at this, there's a wire there, and a part of it just went burned out. And of course, that basically, in a nutshell, is how the story ends. Well, we have this planet, Seychelles planet, and it has one single life form that exists in everything, right down to every microbe. You can't let a germ of that planet get in you, or it's going to make you join the life form. And it will, I don't know, it doesn't seem to worry about the male figures, but the females will always get pregnant and start having young, even though there's no males. Apparently, the spaceship that has landed there has these laboratory rats, all female, no males, so that they won't spread out on the planet and cause them, ecological disaster or something like that. Then they're just females because they're hardy, but guess what else? The females are suddenly having little baby mice that belong to this planet. And there's a very, very obvious and specific trademark to indicate that. You get these, instead of your normal eyes, your eyeballs, you got this green fur growing out of your eyes. That goes through every living thing. Well, they never get as far as letting it happen to a human. But there's your little, baby rats or other animals and so forth. And they have these, bits of green fur instead of eyes. Kind of creepy. But other than the green fuzz or fur or whatever, there is absolutely nothing to distinguish what happens at this planet and what happens on Gaia, which we hear a lot about in Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth. But here, it's treated like this is the horrible thing that it is. Of course, the green fuzz aspect probably adds to it. Makes it sound pretty horrible, pretty nasty. Everything, even right down to a germ, you look at it in a microscope, and it'll have these two little tufted eyes, that are green fuzz. Microscopic. Every living thing has its little trademark of those little fuzzy eyes. So, even things that don't have eyes, really, to speak of. Which is kind of weird, but okay. They have that. At one point in the story, so they're really having to be careful. The first person to land was some guy named Seychelles, hence the name of the planet. It's Seychelles planet. He decided to kill himself and everybody on board the ship so they wouldn't leave, so that they couldn't spread what they had found there, because it would spread if it did. And there'd be no stopping it. So other than just don't allow any contamination, just blow up the ship right there on the planet. Don't ever leave. Nobody leaves. Everybody died. And in Seychelles' journey, there apparently had been mixed men and women, and some of the women were getting pregnant. Even the unmarried ones and so forth. Again, they would have babies with eyes that have green fuzz. But the green fuzz is just a small thing. Everything is this one single entity. They all try to do everything reasonably and efficiently. And I mean, it sounds like it, in some on paper it could sound like a fairly reasonable existence, except you lose your individuality. I mean, you are, as he puts it there at one point, a man is brother to an amoeba or a liver cell. You know, so uh, it's really what's wrong with Gaia, and it's just made more obvious with the green fuzz. Now, you saw the title is Misbegotten Missionary. That, of course, is the title Horace Gold gave it. The the title that he wanted for it and restored to it when he gathered it up into Nightfall and other stories was Green Patches. So, and because of the little green patches that go on the eyes. So, there's one little scare. They want to leave this planet. Not Seychelles group, they died there, but another group had landed there, and they were learning from him. They had made sure that they killed about a mile in every direction, all life within a mile of whatever. And then they had all these laboratory animals they kept watching to see if anything would appear. And they had this barrier that surrounded the ship, sort of like a force field. But there was a couple of minutes there where something kind of slipped, and then they had to get it back up. So, and during that time, one particular critter, a little worm-sized thing about 5 or 6 inches long, managed to seep through and crawl its way to the ship, the whole mile or whatever the distance was, and somehow get unnoticed as it climbed aboard. And because it's shaped like a little wire, it found its way into a compartment where there's wires and just snipped away the piece of the wire there, put that away somewhere, and then put itself in the same place. It had the same rubbery texture and color, looked like a piece of wire, and except that there's a couple little tiny green dots at one end, which are its eyes, its fuzzy eyes, but you don't notice them, you won't know they're there. And it looks like a piece of wire, and it just sits there thinking, well, they're going to head back, and I'm going to bring this wonderful thing we've got to their home planet. And he was ready to succeed, and well, he doesn't succeed. I won't do the spoiler, but let's just say when he fails to succeed, that little diagram at the front of the magazine or in front of the story is what you have instead. So that, in a nutshell, is the one story. There is one particularly interesting difference, however, between the way it appeared originally and the way it appears since then. And they're wondering what to do about this planet because they've got to quarantine this planet. They got to make sure nobody gets there and does anything or goes there, because anybody could just easily pick something up and then they go somewhere and they'll spread this thing around, and it will be spread around. So they're talking about this thing. Well, the one last for the space road. He lifted his glass in the general direction of Saybrook's planet. Saybrook, sorry, not Seychelles. That's what it is. Seychelles is the name of a planet very near Gaia in Foundation's Edge. Is there a connection? I don't know. Saybrook. No longer visible, its sun only a bright star in the visiplate. To the little green hairs that gave Saybrook his first lead. And Weiss nodded. A lucky thing. We'll quarantine the planet, of course. The captain said, that doesn't seem drastic enough. Someone might always land by accident someday and not have Saybrook's insight or his guts. Saybrook had a lot of insight, A, that this was that dangerous, and B, had a lot of guts that he's willing to kill himself and everybody on board his ship to make sure that they never leave. Those are scary things. Suppose he did not blow up his ship, as Saybrook did. Suppose he got back to some inhabited place. Now, there's a paragraph in the original. It's not in the other. The original just continues. Well, the captain was somber. Do you suppose they might ever develop interstellar travel on their own? I doubt it. No proof, of course. It's just that they have such completely different orientation. Their entire organization of life has made tools unnecessary. As far as we know, even a stone axe doesn't exist on the planet. So, one thing we've observed about this life, no matter how balanced it may be, ecologically on a planet or whatever, it does not reach out. It doesn't strive. It doesn't seek to learn. It just does its little existence on a ridiculously vast scale. And between those paragraphs, this is the other one. Okay, suppose he got back to some inhabited place. Here we go. I'd rather not suppose it, but what else can we do? If we could develop a self-sustaining atomic reaction in iron, which I'm told is theoretically impossible, we might blow up the whole planet. They took that out. I don't know. That one paragraph is gone. You could do that. Well, it's basically an iron-based planet, like Earth, or most of the rocky planets are substantially iron. So what do? You can't do very much of a nuclear reaction. It's really kind of cool the way this works. The heavy elements release energy by fissioning. Uranium, plutonium, and so forth. They fission, and every time they do, they release heat, they release neutrons, they release energy. And that, all of our normal fission power is based on that. Fission bombs are based on that too. At the opposite end, however, joining nuclei releases energy. So that's when you get to fusion bombs, the hydrogen bomb and so forth. You're actually fusing the nuclei of the atoms and releasing energy that way. So you could almost think, well, what if you fuse them, release energy, and then fission them and release energy? You just go back and forth like a perpetual motion machine. Well, you can't do that because it's actually shaped like this long bowl where at one side things kind of fall down towards the bottom by fissioning, and at the other end things fall down towards the bottom by fusing. And somewhere at the very bottom of the bowl, there's no way that either one of them can release any energy whatsoever. No matter what way you go, you have to add more energy into it than it's going to release by fizzing or fusing, if you will. And that, interestingly enough, happens at iron, the element iron. So, an iron-based planet, you're not going to turn this planet into a great big nuclear bomb. And so that means you can't do it. And that's what they said. It's impossible. And that's true. It simply is. But that they wish that they could blow up the planet. Obviously, we don't think like that. It's a life. It's certainly, in its own standpoint, should have some right to exist. We just want to protect ourselves from it. And as long as we can do that, let it be what it's always been. What do we care? So that raises up some interesting aspects of the whole thing. But it sure is strange to see that as a much older man, when he was doing Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth, it was as if he seemed to, you really could think he was going along with the idea that it would be a real solution to the galaxy's, civilization issues if you just had this one single big creature that's the whole galaxy. And the only thing, and it was even going to try to force itself with only one small proviso, one small gimmick on that, and that was that Gaia was going to ask Trevize, what is your choice? Do we take the galaxy this way or that way? Are we going to be in charge, or do we just crawl away and die and leave things in the hands of the second foundation, or do we go away, taking the second foundation with us, and everything just goes with the first foundation all by its lonesome? And Trevize has to try to make that decision, the big fallible decision maker, which is ridiculous. I mean, not that it is pretty ridiculous that a person should be an infallible decision maker. I mean, even infallible popes, there's a very narrow, constricted area where one has this sort of infallibility, and there's kind of the only evidence of that infallibility is that no real pope ever contradicts any other real pope on a matter of faith and morals. And the neat part is, even if they didn't bother to take all due care and consult and check, they still won't. Of course, when you do see a contradiction, then you look back and say, well, wait a minute, was this really a pope? And actually, if there's a contradiction, it will invariably turn out that no, there's another reason to say that's not a pope. But as long as those other reasons don't exist, there will not be a contradiction. And the thing is, we don't know a pope is infallible because he's so infallible he's just always right about everything. Because they're not right about everything. They're only right about a very narrow area of faith and morals and teaching the whole church in an authoritative way by virtue of their office as pope. So it's very, very, very narrow, constricted thing. Everywhere else, there's follables, everybody else. Maybe sometimes more so in many cases. So there would be that. But then the other thing would be, and there hasn't been any contradiction, or at least not where there's evidence that you can show that actually the person didn't really get the office, but you trust the infallibility because of the office that is held, and not because it looks right or you agree with it, because you may or may not feel like agreeing with it. Now, we're talking about just a man who somehow seems to be infallible about all kinds of things and all kinds of decisions. Seems like he ought to get in the investment business because he'll always know the right stocks to buy, and he'll know the ones that are going to go up the best and most profitably, and when to buy and when to sell and all the rest of it, and make himself ridiculously rich in a very short span of time. So I think that's kind of less than ideal, but even if somebody could do that, and I didn't see that he's doing anything like that, how does somebody get a reputation as being an infallible decision maker? You just have this habit of always being right. I think he's kind of trying to introduce a policy of infallibility. We'd like to have that. You have it in mathematics, the proven theorem, any theorem that's proven, no matter how difficult the proof may be, Fermat's last theorem, etc., and so forth. Even if it's that complicated, once proven, it's infallible. You don't come back later. That's why it is, by the way, that theology, you kind of map it to a science, and it is a science, is really more like mathematics than, say, physics or chemistry, where the experiment decides things, and you can always learn more, and there can always be subtler details about everything. But in mathematics, once a theorem is proven, you don't go back and say, well, I don't like that theorem. I want a new theorem that doesn't say the same thing or says the opposite because I like that better. Theology, you're supposed to take the same approach. And when you don't, that's when you get a lot of different religions all disagreeing with each other. So, well, I'm a little off topic here. But the key point of all this is Trevize is going to make this big decision at the end of Foundation's Edge, which he's going to be reconsidering all through Foundation and Earth, and end up making the same foolish decision again. He's going to throw it with Gaia. That decision made, Gaia will just be like Saybrook's planet. They will not stop at anything. They will just bring their one single organism to every place they ever can. So, and now he's an enthusiast of it, but he doesn't know where to go next when he gets to the end of Foundation and Earth. And where to go next is the real limitation of Gaia has to be discovered. It's no protection against invasion from outside the galaxy, even if the thing happened. That's not how we'd want to meet some, incoming alien. It really isn't. What we really want would be something where we pull together as individuals who unite to a purpose. That's what we want. That's humanity being human in the best sense of the word. That's what we're looking for, is humans being human in the best sense. So, if that was going to continue, Gaia would have to be, Trevize would have to change his mind and decide, Gaia is not the way. And so, you can go for the first or the second Foundation, and, there's really good reasons he should go for the second, because Selden thought it was a great idea, and, at least story-wise. Practicality, I'd probably say go with the first, but the story, I'd say it should go to the other. So, and why is he now willing to go with this idea? Only because on Gaia they don't grow green fuzz out of their eyes. I see no other difference. And and they were willing to let Trevize decide whether they're going to try to convert the whole galaxy. They're ready to do it, and they were conditioning that on the one thing. Saybrook's was just ready to do it, period, without asking anybody. Small distinction. So, but it's really a fascinating story in view of all of that. And it's kind of interesting to see, we don't go blowing up planets, even talk about stuff like that. It's just, you can see why they pulled that out. But in the around 1950, that might have seemed like a reasonable thing. This is a very deadly, dangerous planet. It can be wildly contagious and in the worst and most dangerous sense. Maybe there would be a case for literally, blowing it up, or at least doing something to eliminate all life on that planet. So that is Misbegotten Missionary, or otherwise known as Green Patches. Thanks for listening.